In 1830, a woman's body was found floating in the bay near the fish market in Rio de Janeiro. Her face was disfigured, unrecognizable. The child disappearances stopped the same week, and everyone assumed it was her. Nobody could prove it. Nobody tried very hard. Her name was Bárbara dos Prazeres, and she is one of the most disturbing figures in Brazilian popular history. Part legend, part horror story, and part something else. Something the legend doesn't quite have a name for, but I think I do. Welcome to Halls in the Forest. I am Ariane Saltorius. I am a folklorist and a Gothic fiction scholar and the publisher of Caipora books. Today we are going to Rio de Janeiro, not the Rio of Carnival and beaches and bossa nova, the other Rio, the Rio of 1790, of fetid alleys and elite, and a woman who arrived beautiful and dangerous and left the city as a legend it could not quite kill. This is her story, Bárbara dos Prazeres, and I want you to pay attention because this story is going to ask you something uncomfortable at the end. 1790. Rio de Janeiro, capital of elite in Brazil, a city of hate and hierarchy, and the particular cruelty of colonial society. In this city arrives Bárbara Vicente de Urpia, 20 years old, Portuguese, and by every account extraordinarily beautiful. She arrives with her husband, Antonio de Urpia, a nobleman, well connected, welcomed immediately into the creme de la creme, the Count of Hungary. Why did they leave Portugal? Two versions survive. The first, Bárbara had poisoned her own system. The journey to Brazil wasn't escaped. The second, she had taken a lover, a high-ranking Portuguese nobleman, with her husband's apparent approval. And someone more powerful than all of them decided the couple should disappear quietly to the colony. Neither version is very comfortable. Both versions tell you something about Bárbara before she does anything else in this story. She was already, from the beginning, a woman around whom the ordinary rules bent and broke. Rio's elite opened its doors to her. Every man of consequence wants her attention. She is desired by nearly everyone. She ignores all of them. And falls in love with the free black man she meets at a serenade. Her husband dies shortly after, stabbed in the back of her neck while he slept. Bárbara is never charged. A man described in conflicting records as either Romani or black. Translation: a man with no power, connections, a man the authorities could afford to sacrifice, is accused, executed, case closed. Bárbara, now a widow, loses access to the court because few believe in her innocence, in Brazil or Portugal. She moves to the outskirts of Cidade Nova with her lover, a disreputable area at the time, far from the saloons that had welcomed her. Years passed, then her lover dies too, during a quarrel. Jealousy, financial disputes, a fight that escalated beyond return. Again, Barbara is never charged. Again, another man is found, accused, executed. Two murders, two convenient scapegoats. One woman who walks away both times. But hey, I want to be careful here because the history of women in Brazil, not only in Brazil, I'm afraid, in colonial Brazil specifically, is full of women blamed for things men did. So, women accused of witchcraft, of murder, of corruption, specifically because they lived outside male protection and therefore outside male accountability, outside male control. The scapegoat mechanism was real, it was systematic. And yet, two deaths, two convenient strangers executed in that place. I'm not saying I know what happened. I am saying the pattern is notable. Still desired, still dangerous. Now without a patron and without protection, Barbara turns to prostitution. Not the desperate kind. Not yet. She becomes the favorite of wealthy merchants, crown officials, bishops. When the Portuguese royal court arrives in Rio in 1808, she moves to the refined Rua do Lavradio, discreet visits from mysterious and elegant man. Rumor places her in the company of the nobility, perhaps even royalty. And then the body begins to fail. Syphilis, leprosy, smallpox, the diseases that move through bodies that belong, well, to many people without care. In 1825, she travels to Cisplatina, present-day Uruguay, to serve soldiers. When she returns, the beauty's gone. The illnesses have left their marks: dry hair, bruises, brittle teeth. The clients have moved on. She ends up at Arco do Teles. Today, Arco do Teles is a beautiful, charming landmark near Praça 15 in downtown Rio. Tourists photograph it, locals walk through it on the way to work. In the 19th century, however, it was a fattened alley in the ruins of a great fire that had burned through the area in 1790, the same year Barbara arrived in Brazil, as if the city had been marking the occasion. The ruins have become a refuge for beggars and prostitutes for 2 vinténs, almost nothing. Anyone could avail themselves to a woman who worked in the shadows there. Bárbara dos Prazeres, whose name came from an image of Our Lady of Pleasures that stood in the alley, which she chose as her protector, was now one of these women. From the elite saloon to Arco do Teles, from desired by royalty to invisible in the shadows, the city had used her up. And here's where the story goes Gothic horror. Desperate, disfigured, with nothing left that the world valued, Barbara turned to sorcerers, to practitioners of what the records called black magic. She left these consultations with prescriptions, bathed in boiled animal blood to cure leprosy, to restore the youth, to bring back what the years had taken. Nothing worked. Then a sorceress suggested something supposedly infallible. Not animal blood, child's blood. Still more fresh. Because that's just the next logical step, seems to be. All the time, every time in these stories. So you go from, oh, why not? Why not child's blood? I mean, why? I'm laughing because I'm scared. As a mother, this is always very uncomfortable. Around 1828, the municipality of Court begins recording child disappearances, bodies never found. Panic spreads through Rio. Children are locked inside. Families stop letting their sons and daughters walk alone through the streets, and newborns begin to disappear from the Foundling's Wheel at Santa Casa de Misericórdia, the rotating hatch where desperate parents left unwanted babies anonymously in the care of nuns. The number of babies left at the wheels dropped dramatically. The connections made quickly. The witch of Arco do Teles, the woman who bathed in children's blood. In 1830, a disfigured body, face unrecognizable, floating in the bay. The disappearances stop. Everyone assumes it's her. Now I want to stop to ask you something. What is Bárbara dos Prazeres? Is she a monster? A woman who descended from beauty and power into something so desperate, so stripped of everything in the world had given her, and then taken back, that she crossed the line that cannot be uncrossed? Or is she a scapegoat? A woman who lived outside male protection, male control, outside societal respectability, outside the categories that colonial Brazil society used to determine whose life mattered, and therefore became the obvious face for every crime that needed one. Let me tell you about another woman in history built a nearly identical legend around. Oh, you know her. Elizabeth Báthory, Hungarian noblewoman, late 16th century, accused of torturing and killing young servant girls. Never formally tried for those crimes. A noble status protected her from that. Placed under house arrest in her own castle until she died in 1640. And then, decades after her death, the legend grew. Blood bathing, hundreds of victims, a countess preserving her beauty by bathing in the blood of young women. None of that is in the contemporary trial documents. But blood bathing appears in accounts written long after her death, in moralizing retellings, in Gothic reinterpretations, in the 18th and 19th century imagination that needed her to be a specific kind of monster. Was Báthory guilty of something? Probably most likely she was. The volume of testimony suggests real abuse, real violence, but the scale, the ritual, the Gothic theater of it, that was constructed afterward by a man who had reason to destroy her reputation, by a culture that needed a story about what happens to powerful women who accumulate too much land, because she was powerful. She had vast lands. A powerful man wanted those lands. Sound familiar? Bárbara dos Prazeres had nothing by the end. No land, no beauty, no protection, no clients. But she had a legend. And the legend needed blood. The blood-bathing mythology attaches itself to women like Báthory and Bárbara with suspicious consistency. Not because these women were saints, abused and possibly killed. Bárbara likely killed. But likely killed is not the same as bathe in children's blood to restore her beauty. Last part is not history. That is what society constructs around women. It needs to make maximally monstrous around women whose power or whose desire or whose refusal to disappear requires a story so extreme that no one will mourn them. Beauty equals corruption. Female desire equals predation. The powerful women who equals the monster. And the oldest story in the book. And it is almost never entirely true. Both things can be real simultaneously. Bárbara dos Prazeres was probably not a saint. And the legend built around her was shaped by the same cultural machinery that built the legend around Báthory. The machinery that takes a woman who cannot be contained and turns her into something monstrous, so that her destruction feels not just justified, but necessary. So, what is Bárbara dos Prazeres? She is both. She has to be both. That is what makes her Gothic rather than simply historical. The ambiguity is not the problem to be resolved. It is the point. Arco do Teles still stands. Today it is charming, photographed, a symbol of old Rio preserved among a modern city. But there are people, and there have always been people, who say that on moonless nights, when the shops are closed and the bars have gone quiet, you can hear a woman laughing in the alley. Not crying, not moaning, laughing. I think about that laugh. I think about it belongs to a woman who arrived in Rio at 20 years old, beautiful and dangerous, and already carrying a story nobody could fully contain. Who chose desire over safety every single time. Who descended further than most people survived and kept going anyway. Who the city of Rio de Janeiro could not quite absorb, could not quite explain, could not quite keep down. Her name was Bárbara dos Prazeres, and she is still here on moonless nights, laughing.